Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm a social studies educator, historian, and host of this, the Everything is a Primary Source podcast. I'm also an avid collector of popular culture artifacts. I love what I find at thrift store outlets, garage sale leftovers, and what I spot just making my way around the built world. I enjoy sorting through boxes of free books and magazines, not to mention online collections like Internet Archive, and of course the Library of Congress. But you don't need to spend your time digging through bins or following online rabbit holes to get a look into the past. The movies and TV we watch, the books we read, and the games we play are all documents of the past. So is fashion, food, music, toys, even the roads we travel on and the places we live and work in. Everything is a primary source. This podcast is the result of exhibiting these kinds of artifacts in public, getting passersby to select an item they connect with, and then chatting with me to see what it says about the time, place, and people who made it. The conversation you are about to hear, therefore, is your history, my history, our history, through popular culture. Here with Mary Kate at NCSS in Boston, and you're coming all the way from a place I know pretty well, Fayetteville Manlius,
Yes.
which is one of the many places, to my understanding, named after the Marquis de Lafayette, right? Because
Yes.
he came through there on his
Yeah.
tour, and like everywhere else, they named it somehow after him.
Yeah.
But Fayetteville Manlius is known for a lot of other things, including you being there.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your social studies life. Like, what do you do, and what are your observations about the discipline of late?
Sure. So I am, I'll give you a little context, right? Because that's what we do
Yeah.
as historians. Got to have some context. So I am a 17-year veteran educator. Most of the time, 16 years of it I spent in 8th grade, but I've also taught high school as well. But I'm in a new position now as the K-6 social studies curriculum specialist. So I'm lucky enough that I have been, at this point, I've been able to see social studies literally K through 12. So that is been really interesting, especially not having a background in K-6. So that's been really interesting. But I also have a deep background in media literacy and media literacy education.
How did you get to that? What did it take to become media literacy consultant guide?
Well, I was interested in it as an undergraduate. I just didn't know what it was called. I kind of got to it through propaganda and teaching propaganda and primary sources in that regard. And I was introduced to it at a college party, believe it or not. And it
Most of
stuck,
these things happen,
right. That's what college is all about. You know,
What a
getting your-
rockin' party!
Yeah,
You're like,
yeah.
media
You're-
literacy.
I know, it's so nerdy. But I was introduced to an organization called Project Look Sharp, which is based out of Ithaca College, and their whole thing is media literacy analysis. And I just really have spent literally my career learning, trying to perfect the craft, and nobody really cared about what it was. But then, the 2016 election happened, and there was this sudden our information landscape is polluted.
It's remarkable.
It's polluted,
Yeah.
and wait a minute, nobody knows how to access and evaluate and create media. So how can we teach our students that? I see it as a civic skill. So just been trying to really make media literacy a part of the social studies curriculum for a long time.
It's interesting that you bring up elections, because honestly, it seems like in the 21st century, each general election cycle is related directly to the media
Absolutely.
of the time.
Yeah.
Where you go from 2008, the YouTube election,
Right. And then you look at this election and the shifts that happen, and these sort of this I read an article by Charlie Warzel who called it the fracturing of cultures. And sort of this monoculture that we've had, this mass culture, is fracturing apart with social media and the personalization.
And what we're doing right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Podcasting
exactly.
is a big part of that.
And so people are calling this the influencer election.
Yeah.
You know, what role influencer media played.
It keeps you busy as a media analyst.
Yeah. And creator, but we can talk more about
that. And they go hand in hand, because anybody who's creating media needs to understand that when you do that, you're automatically putting it out there for people to dissect and analyze and consider.
Yeah.
At least they should. It's not something they should just disregard or take on face value all the time. Do you feel as educators, we are the days of being the person at the front of the room, just kind of
the sage on the stage.
Right, that expression. That's gone.
Mm-hmm.
We are
facilitators,
mentors.
Mm-hmm.
You think about literacy in the most literate sense of being able to read.
Decode.
We're doing that for everything.
Yeah.
And things. Is that where you see social studies teachers in particular right now?
Absolutely. And what's been interesting now in my role as in K6 is the refrain I'm hearing, the chorus rather, is I don't have time. It's not tested. I'm in New York State, so it's not tested. I'm running out. I don't have enough time.
Yeah.
So how can we make it a more humanities approach? Where can we use literacy, like books, to engage, to spark inquiry? Excuse me. Where can we use media like images, videos, that sort of thing to spark inquiry? So. I see that very much. How can we're literacy teachers too. You can't access history without being able to be literate. Not just the traditional sense of like reading words, but think about it. Thinking like a historian. You're looking at primary sources beyond writing, and that's images. That's excuse me, video. That's money. That's flags. That all that stuff. That's media. Any message that's mediated. So, I think if we could just be a little bit more intentional in when we engage in those primary sources, to just talk about media literacy a little bit. It doesn't take
You're in the right
changes.
place, because that's exactly, I am on board. That's
I'm preaching to the choir.
This is absolutely, but to that end, I suppose social studies teachers in particular have always been doing that, even before this digital age, even before social media or any of this just wave after wave of new kinds of information coming out. They've always been doing it, right? It's just because the landscape of that has changed so dramatically, we may feel as if we are being pushed to the side. And I think that, we were talking about sage on stage, location in the classroom. It would be fun to study where teachers set up in their classrooms in the 21st century, in the 2020s, even compared to the 2010s and the early 2000s. I find myself, I have this remote, very cheap remote mouse. I end up in the back of my room a lot.
Yeah.
I'm still,
Thank you so much.
Physically above the students. I'm standing most of the time. They're sitting. But I find myself kind of with them.
Yeah.
And we look at things together.
Yeah.
And talk about it together, analyze it together, answer questions together. And I like that. It's not me saying, here's slide number 25 of 40 and write down all the information on it, because that's the only thing that you need. It's minimal text, maximum media.
Yeah.
Because that's their world. That's what,
For sure.
That's what they're going. That's what they're already in. It's not what they're going to be in. They're already in it. So it's best for us as teachers in this controlled environment of our classrooms to act that way, and our placement in proximity to the front of the room
I think communicates a lot to them as far as we're learning too.
Yeah,
We're
and
not
I think
experts.
and I think that hits on one of the key media literacy concepts. When you're engaging in that, decoding or analysis or evaluation, I'm sure this has happened in your classroom where one kid or even you takes away a different message than somebody else.
Yeah.
So it hits on that media literacy concept of different people can view the same media message differently.
I was
right?
just talking to a teacher from not
So perspective
much
taken.
further down the line from down the Erie Canal from you
Okay.
in Fairport.
Oh, okay.
Just an hour ago.
Yep.
And we were looking at this painting right here from 1848, War News from Mexico, which itself depicts media literacy.
Right, isn't that
In
fun?
action.
How meta.
Exactly, and it's like they knew we were going to use this for. And I honestly think that the painter did intend for it to be used in the future to understand his time period. And I showed him this because I use it in my class all the time.
Okay.
And every time I use it, a kid brings up something totally new.
Yeah, isn't
totally
that
different.
so great?
It feels so good, right?
I know.
And then he,
You're
an
like,
hour
"Oh,
ago,
I never would have thought of that.
brought up something that I'd never noticed
Don't you
before.
love it?
He's like, oh, so, this is, because the thing that blew my mind a couple years ago, this girl in my girl in my class, brilliant. She's artistic. She went to an art school.
Okay.
And so she understands design. She
Right.
understands this kind of thing. And she said, it's the shape of the country.
Whoa.
And like it took 1 second. I'm like, whoa!
Yeah.
I felt like some '80s movie, or I'm like, whoa, like flying through like a vortex or something.
Right? Blowing my mind.
What's happening?
Wow, I never would have.
Because she's like the
Yeah,
southeast,
there's Florida.
the northeast,
Uh-huh.
with women coming out of the kitchen. The middle of the country, and then what the gentleman earlier today pointed out, he said, this is the West reaching to the West.
Yep.
And I'm like, that's...
Holy cow. But also turning east to try and connect because if you look, it's what?
He's looking to the
1848,
east. Right?
pre
He's looking for instruction
pre-railroad.
from
Yeah.
old Washington.
Wow.
Who even kind of looks like Washington.
Yeah.
So this...
That's so cool.
This is a painting, so obviously the painter wanted us to analyze it. It wasn't meant to be. Now, you can find prints of the same thing. And what I'll do on my test, for example, because we spend so much time on this in class, I'll give them the print version on the test, because it's in black and white, so
Sure.
copy's easier, and say, what are we losing? What messages are missing because it's black and white?
Yeah.
Because you don't get what's happening here, which
Yep.
is the colors of the flag, red, white, and blue, are not. So, I mean, not to make our conversation all about war news from Mexico, but
No,
that's
but that's a good
great
example.
example
Yeah,
of
no,
what
no,
we're
no.
doing as teachers, and that it's not just modern media.
Right. And so my sort of like I see my challenge, and that's not quite the right word I'm looking for, but how about this? My goal is to help kids take those skills that we're working on in a historical context and bring them into the present. So how can I, when can I take what we're doing with this image, for example, and say, all right, let's apply those exact analysis processes and thoughts and inquiry process to a TikTok video, right? Or the the games you're playing on on your Xbox.
When you do that, do you have like an overall template for them to consider? Because
That's a good question.
social media especially, it comes out so
Yeah.
fast.
And it changes so fast.
And it in so many different forms. There on Instagram, you have everything from worded messages to what it's intended for, pictures. It's a constantly refreshing
Yeah.
feed. So do you have like a certain
No, I don't really
approach?
I mean, I don't have a template because from the research and the readings, that like a checklist doesn't work. So I don't subscribe to the checklist or like. And I don't have a template because things are changing all the time.
Yeah.
But my sort of framework is step one, if you can read the sourcing information, read the sourcing information. Step 2, consider the purpose.
Yeah.
So author is 1, I guess, and that's
Yeah.
sourcing. 2 is purpose. Why was this created? To persuade, inform, entertain, or sell. How does that affect the reliability, right? See, there you go. You got your little checklist.
Yeah. This
Yeah.
is one of the forms my students. I've gotten confirmation
Yeah,
from former
exactly.
students like, yeah, we get sick and tired of this form.
I'm sure.
But I'm like,
It drills.
have it in your head,
Uh-huh.
and this will also ensure that you'll never get to enjoy a movie again because
I know,
the
that's
whole
what my
time you're in the
kids would say
theater,
to
you're
me.
like, wow, that's a, like.
No, and that's the thing, and that's when I do PD or like all that sort of thing. One thing I tell teachers is you're likely doing this already. It's just a matter of being more intentional. And like media literacy doesn't necessarily have to be another thing to teach. Just when you show America the Story of Us or a clip from Ken Burns' FDR, in addition to your content questions, ask a couple questions about media literacy. Like, give them this is who Ken Burns is. Why might we find this a reliable source? What might make it unreliable? And then this is the key: is giving kids practice and time to ask their own questions about media, and that is something. I was at a PD years ago, and the person running it was like, how often do the students in your class ask questions rather than provide answers? And I was like, oh my God, that's what media literacy is. It's just habits of inquiry. So if we can, yes, they can answer those questions, and that's good, but can we also provide space for them to also ask questions about the media that they're consuming, but also creating?
Yeah.
I
think that back and forth, the student not being just recipient.
Yeah.
It matches up. It parallels with, I think, going back to our origins conversation, something that's happening in the media space as far as more creation. Mm-hmm. People are creating more media like never
more than
before.
ever. I mean, there's this infographic that I use with the kids all the time. It's like 1 minute on the internet. In 1 minute on the internet, how much is consumed and created? And the kids are like, 1 billion, all that. And likely your students are media creators, whether they're on social media or not. They probably have taken a photograph on their phone, or wrote a song or
anything at all. And there's different categories of it. It could be like throwing together a quick little video.
Yeah, or even doing a
pop up
Google
there.
Slides presentation in your room. That's still creating media.
It's like different. It's just a little bit, formal versus informal. But I think this is great. I appreciate your insights on this.
Yeah.
Do you want to quickly segue to a primary source?
Sure.
You're an expert.
Well,
so
I don't know about that, but...
what you're describing is exactly what I do. So this
great.
is the origin of the podcast.
We're all doing it.
Do you have a piece of media that you would like to talk about right now? A piece of pop culture? Either from my table
from
or...
your No, just grab something. I didn't get a chance to look at it.
Or I was also thinking, your shirt says PBS.
Yeah.
We could talk about PBS.
The station, or you want me to do?
Kind of like, so I would do, for this.
We could analyze my T-shirt.
There you
That's
go.
a piece of media.
Let's do that.
Yeah, sure.
Because,
should I explain what it says since we're on?
It reminds me a lot of those I Love New York, which I assume that was like the original
design.
I Heart, and then tell me what.
So this is a shirt that says I Heart PBS. Public Broadcasting Services. Yeah.
It says something about PBS that you can just use its initials and everyone knows what it is. Mm-hmm. Because go back in time, 60 years, and that wouldn't necessarily be true. Mm-hmm. It almost saw the end of its existence.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Mr. Rogers.
Right. I've seen that.
Gosh, it makes me choke up every time I see it.
He should have been
a saint.
I think he is. But I mean, I've gotten, when I saw that documentary, I saw it in the theater, I got emotional.
Oh, I cried.
Because
for sure.
I'm like, yeah, he was our guy. He was looking out for us kids. And even before we were born, he was our advocate, and he was like the ultimate.
So like this, all of these feelings you're feeling about Mr. Rogers, all of that emotion, you associate with
3 letters.
three letters, right? And so the shirt evokes, it's evoking associations, emotional connections, values, right? So like what values are embedded in media? I know it's a silly just print iHeart PBS, but like just this alone, pulls so many different pieces and different things within your schema.
And when it comes to putting it on a T-shirt, you also have buttons. There's, I'm sure,
Yeah, I
mugs.
get that.
There's all sorts of things like that.
My iHeart PBS button too.
Who is so like? Is it the consumer and therefore the displayer, you? Is it your choices that we analyze as a primary source,
Oh yeah.
or is it them making the design at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you could probably do both.
You could do both.
Yeah, I think you could do both. No, that's a great question. I think it depends on your objectives in a lesson. Like there's so many different key concepts of media literacy. It's hard. You don't want to do it all at once. So what's your lesson objective? What key concept in media literacy do you want people to understand? And I think that can guide you in what questions you ask.
So if I asked right here,
What's the purpose?
why did they make it?
What's the purpose of this
Right.
media message?
And it's that I Love New York thing. It's been around forever, right? And I feel like that might have been the original emoji, right? Just simple heart, and which I found out actual hearts look nothing like that.
Right,
So
right.
if you like opened up somebody's chest, they don't.
Looks like a fist.
It's not it's not a like that, but it's like that. It's a simple statement. I love New York. What's interesting about that, and you live in New York State,
yes.
you don't find those T-shirts in upstate New York.
No.
It's a New York City
a New
thing.
York
It's
City
like,
thing.
I love New York.
Unless you're at like one of the thruway stops as you get
Right.
closer to downstate.
They'd be like, oh yeah. So you don't have to bother.
Right.
You could pay more here because in the
Right,
city
right,
it's like $3 because like they have the stands are just bulging with them. When it comes to PBS, attaching them to kind of incorporating that, and I've seen other people do the same thing. I love whatever. And in fact, there's a media company which is kind of a mashup between the early 2000s Apple trend of lowercase I everything, and then the heart, iHeartMedia.
iHeartRadio.
They're a gigantic media conglomerate,
Yeah.
and they exist based on combining.
Yeah.
And I'd be even curious to ask if Apple was tapping into the iHeart New York
Oh, that's an
by
interesting
using
connection.
the I in front of their devices.
Self
in perpetuity.
Yeah.
They're always
that's
doing
really
that.
fascinating. I haven't. I don't know.
So, why did you get the shirt?
Why? Because I love PBS. I value. This is my bumper sticker, if you will, right? These are my values. So I got the shirt because I approve this message, right?
Yeah, and you're communicating, and you want to communicate.
Absolutely.
Even if people don't react to it,
Yeah.
right? Even if it's a way of just very simply stating, I value public
media.
Yeah, democratic
Yeah. And their programming.
access, right? And what they've kind of added to our entire culture, in one way or another. And
And I think so. One thing always kind of blows my students' minds is when I talk about, when we're talking about early concepts of like, what is media literacy at the beginning of the year? We'll talk about what is media, and I'll always say, all right, now look down at your shirt or your clothes or your shoes. Do you have a logo? Do you have writing? Right? You are, like, that is media, right? So I know, we're talking about my shirt, but even that concept of kids like, whoa,
Well, yeah, you were saying before, national flags, state flags, that's media.
Oh yeah, simple, all that stuff.
Because all too often we hook in media equals the news.
Yeah,
and that's it.
It's not all, right.
And
I think that's what kind of puts a lot of educators off, or like makes them a little like hesitant to engage in media literacy education, because I think it's got so wound up and associated with news and news literacy, which absolutely that is a part of it, and the news media and the current state of our politics and media landscape. I think it scares a lot of teachers to be like, I don't want to get into that. I don't want to be accused of that sort of thing.
But it's actually the safest way to teach.
I 100 wholeheartedly.
Because it's third person. It's
exactly.
You're removing yourself from it.
I always tell educators, you use, this is going to sound weird, but use the piece of media as your shield. You're not asking kids about their opinions on a controversial topic. You're asking them, what messages are you receiving from this piece of media, and what makes you say that? So where in the media? So if it does get a little if it does get a little heated, you just say, okay, that's your conclusion. What evidence from the media makes you say that? Where in this media that we're looking at made you come to that conclusion? That way, it takes the person, like a personality out of it, and it helps somebody else to be like, oh, I can see where your thinking came on that.
Right.
That perspective taking, that like curiosity, which I think is so, that's when we get into like civic discourse, and so much, we need so much practice in that. But I'm absolutely with you on that. I think this is the best way to do it.
Yeah.
I'm just asking them to ask questions.
The closest you can get into any kind of controversy or being accused of anything is like, well, why did you select these things to do?
Exactly.
But it's like, well, I kind of have to in some cases. Like, for example, I teach a current events class, and the election took place.
Yeah.
And I was, in a way, kind of dreading it, talking about it with the students, because I'm like, I don't want in any way, shape, or form any of my own personal ideas. I even said that to my class, and that's another cornerstone of being a good teacher of anything, but media especially, is saying to them, being clear with them, like, I am trained not to let you know how I feel about this personally.
And if I ever do tell you, I will tell you, this is my opinion. If I ever do that,
right.
I will always...
We'll preface it clearly. So I used, when I was showing that, there's a great website called 270 to Win.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And they're wonderful because it shows historic maps.
Yep, and those like little historic contexts.
And we traced, and like I went back, and I used the entire time, I was like helping them read the map, understand it. We went back all the way to, I started with 1860.
Okay.
And we were looking for any signs of patterns. And of course, 1860 is a sectional pattern. There's north, south, and middle. But then the one that we were able to link closest to 2024, 1896, William Jennings Bryan, and his populist ticket of the Democratic Party, almost identical pattern to 2024.
Oh, interesting.
And, just flip-flop colors because he ran as a Democrat.
Right.
And, I mean, that's in a whole other conversation, too. Like, why red and blue?
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
That, to me, I think that was like a 2004 thing. I think it's that recent that they... Because I can't imagine a Republican wanting the color red.
Yeah, I don't know.
In the Cold War era. No, actually. But 270 Win has taken those color codes and applied it to their entire system. And it, of course, fluctuates a lot from 1896 to 2024.
Sure.
But then it gave us an opportunity to talk and learn about William Jennings Bryan and his approach to, and I just happen to have, oh, this connects so perfectly to you, because I happen to have a video I show. It's called The Secrets of Oz, and it's mainly a financial literacy thing, but it's all
a
about
populist allegory.
It is.
And L. Frank Baum is from
Chittenden. That's why I said it's so close.
And his mother-in-law, Matilda Jocelyn Gage, who is a major player in the rights movement and championing Haudenosaunee rights, is her house is in Fayetteville, New York.
So it's right down the Erie Canal.
Yeah.
So in this film, they talk, because they're about to dissect The Wizard of Oz as a populist parable, and it says, so they give a little context to L. Frank Baum, but even before that, they're talking about the 1896 election, and it said Brian instituted the Whistle Stop Tour. He brought his message to the people. Sometimes as many as 4 2-hour-long rallies a day. Like, that sounds familiar.
That sounds familiar, right?
They had, because of electricity wasn't everywhere, they had these torchlight parades, which, from a modern perspective, that sounds kind of scary.
Right.
But in 1896, and it said L. Frank Baum is confirmed to have participated in at least one, Brian supporting parade. So it's like, just, you could approach something like an election, which is kind of scary at first, because it's
as a media analysis.
But I'm like, if we're gonna get past this constant feeling of like we're always at odds with each other, we can't stay. Like, well, here's a correction. Let's not be at odds with each other. Let's look at this together. Let's find what we have in common with each other in every circumstance. We don't have to be polarized. And so, media dissection, media analysis, media literacy is that is the pathway, a major pathway. It's like, hey, you're creating this stuff, but we're figuring it out.
Right. And hopefully together, and understanding that, going back to polarization and what we were talking about earlier as well, your interpretation of it might be different than mine. We're still looking at the same thing. How did we come to different conclusions? And then applying that to that broader understanding of politics. Like, we are living in the same country, we're same candidates. How are we coming to different conclusions about how we want to vote and who we want to support?
And people are so much deeper than their face value. And I feel like one of our jobs as educators is to remind our students that they're individual people. You shouldn't just reduce yourself to a single identity. And say, I'm conservative. And that's why, there's lots of different versions of just that word, honestly. It's not just one thing. Or I'm liberal. Oh, there's lots of different.
Right.
What about, what kind of, and we could go on and on, but it's like your identity should be, and hopefully is more than that.
Complex.
And like you own more T-shirts than I Heart PBS, right? Like, it's not like you wear it every single day.
Right.
Like, this is all you need to know about me. It's like, no, but we use those shared things to learn about each other, and that's what weaves together this wonderful tapestry of us.
Yeah, so how can we, and I think about how we can bring that experience, that unity, those unifying moments, and help kids to see how our media landscape is kind of breaking that, is making that ability to connect less and less on a shared culture because of silos, because of our personalization or algorithms. So how can we get out of those filter bubbles and echo chambers so that we can hear each other and social media is wonderful. It connects. At the same time, it's super fracturing, right?
And it feeds.
And rage bait and clickbait and your eyeballs
back
equal
to the
money.
heart
symbol.
Yeah. on most social media things, people get so excited when like, and then that just feeds into
feeds the algorithm. Every
filter
click,
bubble.
and now even just like on TikTok, the if you look at it for more than a couple seconds, that's information that the algorithm is using and will help to.
Well, both of us are doing our part, I think, to
I
help
hope.
break through that. Because, I mean, our conversation was scattered, but that's okay.
Like a real conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
'Cause we need to get back to that. And we need to model for our students and for each other, honestly, to get us out of those filter bubbles, out of those silos, out of those... I mean, we have the potential... I mean, so many people in this room are from all over the country. We live in a time where that's so possible.
Yeah, the world is a lot smaller now.
Right.
I mean, and that's another piece of media literacy as well, is that ability to ignore. You know, a lot of what you're seeing in your feed is junk. You know, and you don't need to give your attention to everything. And so, you know, let's think about ways that we're not going to be seduced by the rage bait, by the by that sort of thing, and give our students. And this goes back to, I think, one of the first things I said is I see media literacy as a civic skill, right? So if we teach kids how social media platforms work, how search engines work, how algorithms work, that's empowering. That gives them the tools and the power over the algorithm to say, you know what, this is trying to keep my attention and eyeballs. I feel an emotion when I respond to that. I'm going to stop. I recognize that this is not necessarily a reflection of reality outside my feed.
The algorithm is very anti-democratic because it gives you just one thing.
Yeah.
It understands what you're interested in, and then only gives you that, and so therefore you don't have as much choice.
Right.
Of what you access.
And so let's teach kids how to get out of that. Here's how the algorithm works. Here's how you can teach your algorithm. Here's how you can, break out of those echo chambers or rabbit holes that you might end up in. And
we're obviously not the only ones who think this way.
No.
So do you think that there's hope? Where do you predict this, let's say 5 years out? Are we going to improve as a society to break through that? Do you think there's enough of us that are...
I feel like I'm not post-election enough to to not be doom and gloom. But, all right. I suppose I'll give the hopeful, right? The hopeful answer. I certainly hope so, I certainly hope so. It's interesting, I think we're seeing, I don't know if this is happening at your district, but there's a lot of talk about banning phones in schools. So I think we're on the cusp of a really important cultural conversation.
Because that's a reaction.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
That's an absolute reaction
I'm of the, you can disagree with me here, but I'm of the ilk, like, banning phones is kicking the can down the road. You gotta, the phone's their library. Like, that's how kids get adults. So I think we have a duty and obligation to teach young people how to access reliable information today, period. But anyway, I digress.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I think
so I'm hopeful that conversation isn't going to just be this black and white binary. I'm hopeful that we can have a conversation as a culture about our media landscape, what that means for students, and it just, I got an email out of the blue from a student the day after the election, and I had not talked to this student since 8th grade in 2016, and they just reached out to say that I made them feel less alone that day in 2016, which took my breath away. And they emailed me to say, I hope you're not feeling alone. Man, are you kidding me? That was crying in the bathroom after that one. But I wrote back to her, and as I was writing, I was like, I think this is for me, not for the student. But I said, it makes me think of the Benjamin Franklin quote when he was leaving the 1787 convention. Well, Dr. Franklin, what do we got? A monarchy or a republic? And he said, a republic if we can keep it. So that obligation of citizenry to be informed, but it's difficult to be informed if you lack the skills to be discerning, right? And so that's where I see media literacy and civics go hand.
Those kinds of things are no guarantee.
No,
like Franklin said.
Yeah.
And it's a constant. You need to be on top of your business.
Vigilance. Right?
Well, I've had so much fun talking about this.
This is great. Thank you. I could talk about this all day.
It's the magic of this, you know.
Yeah. No,
the last thing I'll put out there, I was just thinking about this the other day. You know, I feel that, and teenagers in particular, are the most common culprits of just wandering around with their phones in front of them. And I say to people all the time, like, imagine an alien coming down from another planet and seeing that. What would they think of it? But then I was watching some footage of New York City in the 80s, and it was like down by Wall Street. Half of the people were walking around with a newspaper in front of them.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
ooh, there's a cool
it
media
actually doesn't look that different.
Yeah.
And so before I go all judgy on, like, you're going to walk into that poll because you're just fixated on this phone. It's like, people are fixated on their articles.
Or your Walkman.
Yeah.
Or your podcast.
We've had a long time of this media. Like, can't you just enjoy walking through your life? And it's like, yeah, but 50 years ago, this guy wasn't.
Yeah, there's advertisements all over, like, let's be real.
It's part of the modern world, and we really shouldn't reject it. Like, I think the overall message we're saying right now is, don't try to get rid of it, because you can't. Learn how to use it properly.
Yes.
So, Mary Kate, thank you so much for taking the time.
This is such a pleasure.
And I love these conferences because I get to do this.
Right? You get to nerd out with a bunch of nerds.
Awesome.
Popular culture, by definition, connects and unites us, and proves that people of different backgrounds, in fact, have a lot in common with one another. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, at least in part, for that reason. If it connects with you and you'd like to add to it, or any of the podcast episodes, just visit everything-history.com and search for the Everything is a Primary Source project, which can be found in the classroom section of the website. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Be sure to rate and share this podcast wherever you are listening to it now, and follow Everything as a Primary Source on social media, including YouTube and especially Instagram. Thank you for listening to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source.